All right, on this video, we are going to talk about the idea of importing graphics and video and so on to the library, and we are going to talk about the concept of symbols and instances. So let's review quickly our XD project. Okay, so if you recall, we had actually, I added this since the last video, the idea of the intro video, which could be like your 3D animation that you would have the title of your project or something, and then that would go to the main menu, and then you've got 3 buttons that go to each of these 3 pages, and then each page has a back button, and that goes back to the main menu. And then in the case of page 2, this goes to 2 sub pages, and this would be a typical structure. It's called an inverted tree structure. And so basically, your page 1 and your page 3 would also have sub pages like these, but this is just an example. Okay, so here's our structure. So let's now take a look at our Adobe Animate project. So we have the intro page, which is similar, which is this page here that plays our 3D. We have our main menu, page 1, 2, and 3. We have our page 1, our page 2, our page 3. And then we have our page 2.1, which is linked from page 2, sorry. And we have our page 2.2, which is also linked from page 2. So that's the structure of our project. Now, the order of these is actually irrelevant. You could have page 3 way down on frame 110. It doesn't really matter because we're telling the playback head to go to different frames, not to a linear progression along the project. So now, that being said, I suggest you do at least maintain some sort of linearity so that as you build your project and it gets more complex, it's not as though you have to, remember, page 90 was frame 90 was page 2 and frame 100 was page 3.3 or whatever. Okay, so it just helps to keep some kind of order to your structure. Okay, that being said, let's go back to let's say page 1. Okay, on page 1, let's import a background. Okay, so here we would use the file, import, and we have 4 options here. And you don't really want to import to stage. You almost always want to import to the library. So let's import to the library. And then you navigate to where you need to go. So in this case here, depending on how complex your project is and how complex your hard drives are, you can see that I've got a ton of hard drives here, and I'm going to navigate to my class folders and then the Mount 120, and there you'll see my 120 project folder. Okay, so you all should have that project folder, which we talked about in a previous video, with a folder with your audio, a folder called with your video, folder called with your backgrounds, 3D backgrounds, and text. Okay, so in the backgrounds department, I'm just going to grab a stone wall. Okay, and I'm going to just open that up, and we see now in the library, remember the library is up here at the top. We have properties and we have library. Okay, and so in the library you'll see the stone wall texture. Now remember what I said in a previous video, we've got these layers, right? And each of these layers has zoom out here and zoom in, there we go. Each layer has the top layer actions, then we have a layer for buttons, a layer for headlines, a layer for text, video, graphics, backgrounds, and audio. And so it's really important that you select the frame where you want the graphic to be imported, or where you want to place the graphic. And then it's important to select the layer. So here I'm using the background layer, and so where our two blue elements cross, that's where we are going to add that graphic. So all you do is you grab it from the library and you just pull it out onto the stage. And so you'll see that that little frame lights up as a graphic is added. Again, super important to select the layer first and then the frame. Okay, so in this case, my graphic's a little too small, so I can scale it. This is the free transform tool, similar to most Adobe programs. You select that, and then you can just scale. And if you hold the shift key down, it will scale proportionally. And if you don't, you can scale it any way you want. Okay, so, I'm going to just sort of stick that in the background. And I'll just distort it slightly just for giggles here. There we go. Okay. So let's zoom back out here. And then, so I got my stone wall in the background. Remember that the layers are stacked. So anything that's on a lower layer is going to be at the bottom, and elements that are placed in upper layers will be on top of that. So all good so far. So the next thing I want to do then is maybe change the color of my text. So that's not really reading too well. So I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to go to my fill color. And I'm going to make it, see what's nice, you can kind of check it out, right? You see how that kind of dynamically changes, which is kind of cool. So we might want to find something that contrasts nicely with that, kind of maybe a bright green or a white would work. Let's go with white. And then the V key, as in V, always goes to the pointer. So no matter what tool you're in, if you hit V, you'll notice it goes back to the pointer. So it's just quick, easy little quick keyboard command. Keyboard commands are super helpful. So if you are inclined to learn them, they're there. But the V key is something that you want to know. Okay, so now we can import a graphic on top of that. So again, I'm going to go to my library, and I'm going to go File, Import to Library. And then I'm going to go find a graphic. Okay, so here, I'm going to go back to my project folder. And again, keeping your project organized. See how much easier this is, right? So those are my backgrounds. So let's go grab a picture. Okay, I'm just going to grab this one and say open. And then you'll see that guy here. And that's a graphic. And notice this graphic has a transparent background. You can do that if you know Photoshop by using the select tool, the wand tool, and selecting the background and deleting it, saving it as a PNG file, and then you can have a transparent background. Notice I screwed up though, right? I put that graphic on the wrong layer. And so I'm going to cut that graphic out and, oops. See, this is, I told you this in the last video, it doesn't, Animate doesn't like more than one thing on one page. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go to my graphics layer, and I'm going to paste that back on the graphics layer. Okay. Now, what? If you import a graphic that does not have a transparent background, let's try this one here. And then we'll go to, where did that go? Playback head, Holy Grail. Is it this one? Yeah. So just to see how that works, you can see that, the background is white and it isn't transparent. So just keep that kind of thing in mind. And if anybody wants, I will make a video on how to knock out backgrounds, but not right now. Okay, so that is a graphic. Now let's go to the main menu for a moment. Now we have these 3 buttons that we added from in the previous project. So what if I, instead of wanting 3 different colors, what if I wanted all my buttons to be blue? So this is where this idea of symbols and instances comes in. So I use the blue bubble here, and that's the graphic. I mean, that's the button that I used. And if I drag out another one of those and say, let me just scale that up real quick so we can see it. Okay. It says page 1 also. And so buttons are what's known as symbols. And symbols are anything that we want to create that we want to use again and again and again. And buttons are one of those things. Notice, however, that if I double click on this, notice now that I'm in the edit menu, right? And if you recall, the edit button timeline is different. In actuality, I'm going to have to scale that up just a little bit there so you can see that hit state right there. Okay, but that's not what we're concerned with right now. What we're concerned with is the button itself. And watch what happens. Now over here, I got my page 1 button. It says page 1 over here because it's a symbol. If I take that and I call it page 2 and hit return, don't ever hit return, not in the text tool, okay? In the text tool, if you're finished, hit the escape key, and that will get you out of the edit mode. And then if you hit the V key, it will go to the pointer tool. However, notice that I changed page 2 to page, and that now it says page 2 as well. And so that's and that happens because it's a symbol, and when you drag the symbol to the stage, it becomes an instance of that symbol. They're essentially exactly the same. You can scale instances and that kind of thing, but if you edit color or text or anything else, you'll change that instance. You'll change that instance and every instance of that symbol throughout the entire project. So obviously that may not be desirable, right? So I'm going to delete that button from there. And I'm going to add, and what I'm going to do here is instead of using the same one, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to say duplicate. And you can name the duplicate anything you want. I'm going to leave the copy alone just because it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to say okay to that. And now here's my blue bubble copy. I'm going to drag that to the stage. And then I'm going to enlarge that so we can see it. And now if I edit this button to page 3 or whatever, escape, back to the pointer, click on the background. Now that button is page 3 and this button is page 2. Okay, so basically that's how you want to create different symbols that look the same but are editable and are not the same instance of that symbol. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. This still goes to page 1, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit that back to page 1, escape, V, and I'm back. Okay, so now if I double click on the background, I get back to the stage and the normal timeline, and you'll see up here I don't have that. See, watch what happens up in this section right here. If I double click on this to edit it, notice that I now have basically a breadcrumb, and if I continue to edit, it would continue going on down here. When you're finished editing a symbol, double click on the background, double click on, what am I doing? Oh, messed up there. Double click on the background, and then you're back to editing in the project mode. Okay, so now this button is linked to page 1. At least I think it is. So what we want to do here is command return. That creates a SWF file. Notice that SWF. Then this is our project kind of running in real time. There's a little button right there. Goes to main menu. Goes to page 1. Okay. The back button goes back. Those are, I think, the only ones that we programmed. Okay. So let's close that up. Everything's working okay so far. So now let's edit our page 2 button. Oh, and some of the buttons you'll notice are built differently, and some may lack a hit state, and that's something that's really important that is sometimes not there. So when you import your buttons from that libraries, you'll want to make sure that the button you have has a hit state. In this case here, the text is locked, so I can unlock that and lock it. If it's locked, that means I can't change it. Okay, unlock means I can. Okay, so now I can double click on that page, and then I can actually that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to this one, and then let's click on this one. It's not locked, and so we can enter that text, and we'll call this page 2. And if you recall, we made some changes to that text, and that was impact, if you recall. And so we can go down and we can go find impact in our text. And impact is right there. And then we made it larger. If you recall, we can slide that by clicking and dragging. We can change the size of that button. That size of that text. And so I'll just stop it at 16 point. And even here, notice that it looks all ratty, right? It just looks kind of nasty, whereas this one looks nice and smooth. If you recall, what we did there was we clicked over here in the properties where it says bitmap, no anti-alias. Click on that and say anti-alias for readability. And suddenly that text looks a whole lot nicer. Okay, so that's essentially working with this. Now let's go ahead and program this. So if you recall, we had put over here our code snippets and our code actions panel. And so we can click on that code snippets, and we want to remember to go to the timeline navigation, and we will then go to frame and stop. Double click on that. That opens up your code window. Remember that you replace the number 5 with the number of the frame that you want to go to. Okay, so in this case here, we want to go to, I believe it's frame 20. Nope, frame 30. So let's go to frame 30. So we take that number 5 right there. We change that to 30. Keep in mind that this is nothing. Do not pay attention to that. Even though it says frame 7, ignore it. The only thing you have to worry about is that value right there. Okay? So, and then you could just click on the little actions thing and it closes that window up. Okay, on frame 30, you will notice that this little back button here probably doesn't have any code on it. I don't recall that we actually did anything with that. So let's go ahead and go to frame and stop. We're going back to the main menu here, right? We're back to frame 10 over here, right? So we'll go to frame and stop. We're going back to frame 10. And now let's test our movie. Okay, so here we go there. Page 2, back, good to go. All right, that's the end of this video, because now what we want to do is we want to talk about adding video. Okay, so let's close this video up and go to the next one.